wanted to look at what would be the kind of some of the choices you might consider based on, the criteria for it being a Linux distribution. But, when I started working on this, Linux has, I said 450 distros. However, there's a lot more than that. There's over 600 now. Probably by the time I finish this video, there'll probably be 800. How do you sift through all that? How do you find the one that's right for you? So as usual, I can't make that decision for you, but I can help with the information that you'll need in order to help you make an informed decision. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. I'm DJ Ware, and this is the Cyber Gizmo. Let's get started. So if you're tired of the Windows or Mac routine, I have a video that covers some of the reasons why you might consider Linux over those. And also, a lot of people, everybody, in fact, talks about, well, this is why Linux is better. It's customization, security, and freedom. So hopefully in that video you'll find that I just pointed hopefully you'll find in there some other reasons besides the obvious ones. When we look at Linux and we're trying to figure out what the heck it is we need, I also put together a video that will help you kind of gather your thoughts on what kinds of things are important to you. What kinds of things do you do on your computer? What is your main focus? I have that video here, and it'll help you go through the requirements to find what you need in order to start. Once you have all those things, then what you might want to do is come back here and watch this video, which will then take you on a tour of some of the more popular distributions and kind of show you what some of these things will do and help you maybe make a decision from there. So every distribution has strengths and weaknesses, right? So which ones are we going to pick? We can make a tier list, and we could go through and pick and choose what I think would be the ones that would have their category, and everybody always has a pointless one. I don't have a pointless one because somebody at some time had a reason for creating that distribution. A lot of times distributions spawn because of a developer that wants to do something new, but the current distribution they're working on, the development management says, no, we don't want to do that. And so what they will do is they will fork that distribution. So they'll take the source code for that existing distribution as it sits. They'll copy it into a repository of their making, and then they will brand that for their use and then also start putting in the features that they want that distribution to have. That's typically how we end up with so much. Use the fork, Luke. That's the reason why. So the categories I'm going to use today are user-friendly champions, balanced brawlers, the customization ninjas, and business only, and then the minimalists, and then finally the ones that are considered stability distributions, which are for those people that they don't need the latest and greatest things, but they do want to just turn on their machine and get to work and not have weird things start happening to them after an update. So what fits into the user-friendly champions? So the ones I put in here, so I'm only going to do 10 of these distributions. So if you're wondering, well, how come you only chose 2? Well, they're the most popular 2 for this category. You may not like Ubuntu, but Ubuntu is by far and above one of the most frequently used distributions in the Linux community, and that would be the Ubuntu desktop, of course. Now, I'm not excluding KDE. I'm not excluding any of the other variants that are under the Ubuntu umbrella. So I'm just categorizing this as Ubuntu, period. The next one in the user-friendly would be Linux Mint. Now, Linux Mint actually has 3 different flavors that you can install. And I'm not talking about the desktop flavors. I'm talking about major distribution differences. So the first one is the Linux Mint that we're all familiar with. the one you see first, which is the one based on the Cinnamon desktop, that is 21.3. There's a variant that is based, now Linux Mint is based on Ubuntu. But if you prefer to have a Linux Mint that's based on Debian, you can do that. It's called Linux Mint for Debian Edition, or LMDE for short. That one has all of the same features as Linux Mint. The only difference is that their base repositories are built on top of Debian. The third one is called Linux Mint Edge. Linux Mint itself is always going to be based on, now this is, sorry for the jump back, but Linux Mint itself is always going to be built on an Ubuntu stable or long-term release. So what does that mean? Well, Ubuntu only releases LTS, or long-term support releases, every 2 years. This year will be a new version of their LTS flagship. Those are supported for as long as 10 years. In fact, if you want, you can get longer support windows for those. Those are based on, currently Linux Mint is based on the kernel that came with 2204, which is 5.15. However, there are times when you're going to want to be able to upgrade your hardware, and so you're going to need a kernel that is newer. Linux Mint Edge offers latest long-term support kernel that the Linux Foundation has produced to date, and currently that is the Linux kernel 6.6. Okay, so let's move on. So we have Ubuntu and Linux Mint in all of its variants in the user-friendly champion. The second category, balanced brawlers. What are those? So these are the ones that I would consider would be a mix of power, ease of use, and they're great for most users. In this one, I would put Fedora. Fedora is always trying to push the envelope a little bit. This is where you try new things. I actually would put Linux Mint Edge here, and then I would also include Pop! OS. And you might be surprised at that choice. Pop! OS gets a lot of criticism today because it's a older release. But again, they are based on the Ubuntu long-term support release. I would also put variants of Arch in here as well that are distro-based. So ones like Endeavor OS, which have, so Endeavor OS has the Arch repositories plus the AUR that are based on the vanilla Arch, but they also have their own repositories that they test other applications that they're wanting to bring in or modify for their distribution. So then we have the customization ninjas. So why didn't I put Endeavor OS here? So you could put it in the customization ninjas as well. It would go either one. Arch Linux, of course, I would include here. I would also put OpenSUSE Tumbleweed. It is a rolling release. It has, if you're familiar with YaST2, there's tons of things you could do to customize the OpenSUSE release and make it look the way you want it to. So those I would consider for the more adventurous that want ultimate control over everything on their machine. They want, in the business releases now, I'm talking about the workstation, the type of workstations you would find inside of a data center. Now, I'm not talking about ones that are building 3D models or working on the development for AI or anything like that. These are strictly the terminals that are used to manage the servers, and those typically are Red Hat, Rocky Linux, or Alma Linux. They could also be Euro Linux that fits in here as well. So, but the only one I'm going to test today is Red Hat. The next category is minimalist. These are the systems that have the smallest footprint. The one I would include here would be Alpine, and also I would include Tiny Core here. Now, I'm not going to benchmark Tiny Core. I haven't spent a whole lot of time with it. I've used it some, but I don't feel like I'm ready to just stick a benchmark on it and cross my fingers and hope for the best. Finally, stability releases. These would be Debian for sure, Linux Mint. There's other glacially paced ones. How am I going to test these? Well, the methodology that I follow is we're going to use the same hardware and software versions that for all the distros as much as we can. But one thing I will do is use whatever the distro comes with. What is their flagship? That's the one we're going to be testing. So if their flagship is GNOME, I'll be testing GNOME. If their flagship is KDE, I'll be testing KDE. So we'll look at things like the multitasking resources. We'll be looking at I/O speed. We'll be looking at FFmpeg, which allows me to test the ability of the system to handle X264 or 265 encoding. Also, we'll be looking at OpenGL, since that is the basis for a lot of games. I don't have any good Vulkan benchmarks yet, so I'm working on a solution for that, but yeah, I don't feel like I have a graphics card that's really up to that task just yet. Planning on being as transparent about this as I can. I will tell you up front that only 6 out of those 10 were able to complete all of the benchmarks successfully. What performance tests am I going to use? Well, in order to do this, we're going to use the Phoronix test suite because I like to use that. It runs the tests multiple times, and the reason for that, you never quite know what the load is going to be on the system that you're running. Linux has lots of background tasks that will just come in and run and update stuff, and then they'll disappear. So why don't we cover kind of what the usability and customizations are to kind of round out today, and then I'll come back for some concluding remarks once we've looked at the benchmark results. So performance is definitely important on your computer, but there's another aspect that should be included that's not one of the things you can measure, and that is it should be fun and it should be easy. You shouldn't have to, struggle or get angry at your system or feel like, that you're lacking in knowledge because you can't solve a problem. So, I mean, those are kinds of things that drive people away from a typical application base or a distribution. What we're trying to do here is we would like to have things that are easy enough to install, but allow for enough customization to be flexible and expand the capabilities of the system as we learn more over time. So my initial installation might be a real base install using a lot of the system defaults just to get it to work. And maybe a couple of months down the line, I might go, well, I think I start to understand a little bit more. I'd like to maybe try some things to try to help the performance of the machine. So we want something that's easy to install like a pro and make things simple without becoming so frustrating you throw up your hands and give up. The other one is, can you express yourself? Can your look and feel and the fonts you use, the colors, the artwork that's on the screen, are those sufficient to express how you feel, and does it match your style? So yeah, I mean, those are important things because those are how you turn your distribution into something that is personalized for you. So with that, let's go look at the benchmark results. And again, I'm just going to cover the high level. If you want the detail, I'll just put them at the end, and I'll put a link below where if you want to be able to go look at them more in depth, you can do that. So here you can see we have Endeavour OS, Red Hat, OpenSUSE, Alpine, Debian, Fedora, Linux Mint Edge, Ubuntu 23.10, which was the latest version of it, and then Pop! OS, which is their latest as well. So let's skip down and take a look at the aggregate benchmarks. So the first thing I want to talk about is the individual benchmarks that make this up. I did use FIO. There's a lot of people who are going to go, why didn't you use IOZone? IOZone in Phoronix is deprecated. So yeah, it probably won't even compile, and even if it did, it probably won't run. So yeah, they don't recommend that. They recommend that you use FIO in order to do the benchmarks. I'm using GL Mark II, and as you can see, not all of them are on, not all 10 are on that list. I'm also measuring RAM speed. Of course, we want to know how well Linux is handling memory. Now, when you're measuring on the same machine, you shouldn't see wide variations, but we'll get into that. And yeah, you should on all these different. Then there's FFmpeg. We're looking at the library X264 and 265. We're looking at a number of scenarios. If you're doing live streaming, if all you're doing is uploading videos to YouTube. So yeah, and then there's platform, which you might be doing when you're editing, and then there are then we have those. So we have high Meno, and this one actually puts some pressure on the system to see how well the system performs using various tests. And then finally, we have stress NG. Stress NG is really meant to really apply a lot of pressure on the kernel. It attempts to break the kernel. So and what we're looking for here is wild swings. So you can already see there's one right there on the pipe test. And this is our harmonic mean of the ops per second. So this is a performance of the I/O. And you can see that, Pop! OS is definitely the leader here, followed by Linux Mint and Ubuntu 2310. Now, there's not a huge difference here. This is pretty close, but that one is not. That was not close at all. So, yeah, Pop! OS clearly has a good lead. Now, that is an ext4 file system that's on Pop! OS. The geometric mean of all tests, again, I wish they would, this is still screwed up. So the winner is actually this one down here, is Pop! OS. It's at 5644.13 is the highest score. Normally this should be sorted in order, and it's still not correct. So yeah, and this will give you an overall. This is an overall geometric mean of all the tests on how well they performed across the board. The CPU massive tests, these are the benchmarks that are actually testing the processor's ability to perform work. Now, this is relative, so the bottom, and you can't control this. This has always been that way as far as I know, is they rank from the slowest machine, they say that's 1, and then the highest. So that gives you Pop! OS is 23.3% faster than Endeavor OS. So yeah, and you can see that they're kind of close here. This is not real far apart. Although now it's starting to get a little bit farther apart when the edge is in there. That could be differences with the scheduler, because that particular version of the kernel has some early changes to the last part of the fair share scheduler, whereas they're running EEBDF. And so, yeah, it definitely makes some difference. As far as the server test, these would be services-oriented type of benchmarks to see how well your system is able to handle, because your services, when they're not in use, will go to sleep. So how long does it take to wake them up, get them onto a CPU, and get them running is when a request comes in. That's important. And so we see kind of the same, almost the exact same relative performance and almost the exact same order. So overall, the first place finishes on the individual tests. Debian had 12, Ubuntu had 9, Linux Mint Edge had 8, and you'll see Pop! OS down here as having 2. So in the individual tests, Pop! OS, this is the number. This isn't an indication of its overall performance. It's an indication of which ones did Pop! OS really excel at. So Debian really excels at 12 out of their 43 tests. So 12 out of the 43, Debian really excels. It showed up number 1 on the test results. But it doesn't necessarily affect these scores very much, because these are the geometric mean across all the tests, right? I hope that makes sense. And then in last place, OpenSUSE Tumbleweed had, again, now this doesn't mean that it's a horrible distribution. It just means that 13 out of those 43 tests, they performed the worst. So somebody's got to be first, somebody's got to be last. I mean, that's the way things work. So yeah, so you probably will see almost, sometimes it'll just flip the order, but that didn't happen here. So Endeavor is about 12. Yeah, so they didn't do too well. Alpine had 8 last place finishes. Pop had 4. So that means that Pop is really showing up kind of as in the mid ground. It isn't the fastest and it's not the slowest, but it performs well enough to capture the title. So that's what that means. Hope that helps. If it doesn't, leave me a question down below and I'll try to answer it. So in conclusion, which distribution reigns supreme? Who's the winner? Well, the truth is, there is no single winner. There's strengths and weaknesses that every distribution has. I know that's a cop-out, but there's more to choices, like I said before, there's more to choices than just raw performance. There's things and capabilities that you want, and so you want to make sure that it's rounded. It has good performance while still having these other things that you need to keep it interesting, easy, and frustration-free. So the one thing that surprised me was Pop! OS. I haven't benchmarked Pop! OS for a while now. They haven't been doing anything new, but I thought, well, I better include them in this because I mean, there's a lot of people that use Pop! OS, and so I want to make sure that I put that in there. Pop! OS actually was the overall highest performing distro than all of the others. But wait a minute, they have an old kernel. How can that be? Well, as it turns out, Pop! OS does roll their kernel occasionally, and the version of the kernel that they're running currently is 6.6. So yeah, it's running with the latest scheduler in it. It's no longer using the fair share scheduler. It's no longer using it. It's using the EEDBF. So yeah, I mean, and it shows that it's definitely running better. The thing about System 76 is, I'll just give a brief about them. So System 76 sells hardware. They sell laptops and they sell NUCs and they also sell desktops and even servers. So they have kind of a wide range of hardware products that they're trying to support. They also have newer hardware in their lines, and so they need a newer kernel to be able to support that. So it's not surprising that they would have a change to the kernel to allow them to support newer hardware, because who wants to buy 2-year-old hardware? Not me. As far as the performance king, that goes to Pop! OS. As far as which distro is the best, that one I'm afraid you have to make the choice, not me. I can't make that choice for you. Before I go, I want to thank all of my supporters, both from Patreon and channel members. Without you, there's the things that I want to do with this channel would not be possible. So I thank you guys. Thank you so much, because I have been able, and I have a device that's coming in order to do the next video on. Without you, those kinds of things would be impossible. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you want to help out, I have a Patreon, and also you can join the channel itself. So with that, let's go look at the advanced benchmarks, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.